Hello, dear students, how are you all? I hope all of you are keeping well and learning lots of new skills at your home. Well, today we are going to start the first lesson of Vistas, which is the third level. This is the first lesson of Vistas, the third level. This story was written by Jack Finney. Jack Finney was an American author, and almost all of his works were based on science fiction and thrillers. Yes, he wrote mainly all of his works were science fiction and thriller. This story, The Third Level, is also a science fiction, which is really a wonderful work of his. Before we start the explanation of this story, it is very important for all of us to understand few terms and to talk about few things. Proceeding further, it is important for us to talk about the World War. This story was published on 7th of October 1950, which was a period after the Second World War. Second World War, which broke out in 1939 and ended in 1945, it left numberless people of the world in depression, and many people suffered. Many people suffered with the outcomes of the war. So lakhs of people across the world, they were suffering with the harsh realities of the world, and lakhs of people were left depressed, and they were left with huge sadness of the war. This is a story of such a character who was a war victim, who suffered lots of due to the Second World War. The story, The Third Level, it exhibits the harsh realities of the war. It also states that how people tend to escape the realities. People do not face them, but they are always trying to leave, they are always trying to escape all those realities. Before we start the story, it is also very important for us to understand and learn few things about the setting of the story. This story, The Third Level, has been set in the New York City. New York City is a very big city in America. New York is a metropolitan city and is a home to lakhs of people. In 1950, this city used to be something else, and now this city is something else. But since our story has been set in the year, the story was published in 1950, also it was written in that same time. So it's very important for us to talk of that time, what this city used to be in 1950. The New York City, in real, if we talk about New York City, now also it is a home to lakh of people. At that time also it was hugely crowded, and many writers wrote about New York City, and New York City has been the setting for many writers of that era. For us, it is important to learn about the city transport of the New York City, because our story is based on that only. As we see that in our country, we call it metro. And we have metros in many cities. Also, we have local trains in Mumbai. In that very same way, New York City has subway. Subway is a train network spread across the entire city of New York, and it has hundreds of stations in the city. And subway is the most important means of transport, which is taken by which is taken by almost 60 to 70% of the New York population. They use subway, which is a train network, to reach many places of New York, since it is a very big city, and it is very hazardous to reach one place to the another with car or any other means of transport. So 60 to 70% people, 70 to 80% people use the subway now also, and during that era also subway was a very important means of transport. Our major setting, we are going to talk about a very important rail station of New York City, which is the Grand Central Rail Station. Now also it does exist, and in that era also Grand Central Rail Station was very huge, very famous, and very important rail station of the city. It is very important for us to know about the Grand Central Rail Station, because our story revolves on that rail station itself. The Grand Central Rail Station is a major and the central rail station of the New York subway rail network. Now, if we talk about the New York subway rail network, or the stations of New York subway rail network, the stations, hardly very few rail stations are built above the level, whereas almost of the New York subway rail network. Now, if we talk about the New York subway rail network or the stations of New York subway rail network, the stations, hardly very few rail stations are built above the level, whereas almost all of the rail stations are built below the land level, or they are built underground. If we talk about stories, or if we talk about floors of the rail station, if we talk about the levels of rail stations, they are not multi-storied, or we cannot say that the levels of the rail stations are one upon the another, but instead the rail stations floors or levels are underground. It means if you walk down, it means if you take the stairs and if you walk down, you will reach to the first level. Again, if you walk down and if you take the stairs, you'll reach to the second level. And again, if you walk down, you take the stairs and you go downstairs, then you will reach the third level. This is how the levels have been constructed. This is what the design of almost all the rail stations of Metro Rail Network, New York Rail Network. So before we proceed further to the story, it is very important for us to talk about few things, and let's talk them. So, as we have discussed, the story The Third Level was published on 7th of October 1950, is written by Jack Finney, and Jack Finney was an American writer who wrote mainly science fiction and thrillers. Also, we have discussed that this story exhibits the harsh realities of war, especially Second World War. It is also about the modern day problems and how people tend to escape reality by various means. In these days, we find that many people are suffering with many things which are the harsh realities of their lives, but they do not accept them. Instead of facing them, instead of dealing with them, they always tend to escape. They always tend to find some better way to ignore them. Now, proceeding further, if we talk about the characters, the first and very most character of our story is 31-year-old man. He's named Charlie, who hallucinates and reaches the third level of Grand Central Station of New York City. Now, what does the word hallucinates mean? Or the word hallucinations? The word hallucinate, which is a verb, or hallucinations, which is a noun, it means you see something which is not at all in front of you. For an example, you are sitting somewhere, you are sitting in a garden, and if you start seeing that there is a war being fought between two armies, you see many soldiers fighting to each other, which is not at all happening there. But if you can experience that, if you can see that, it means you are hallucinating a war. That is what we call receiving hallucinations of something. So, hallucinate means when you see something in front of your eyes which is not at all actually there, which not at all does exist there. So, what happens? Our protagonist, who is a 31-year-old man, his name is Charlie. Charlie is the protagonist of our story. He is 31 year old and he is also a victim of war. So what happens? He hallucinates the third level of Grand Central Station, which does not even exist. Grand Central Station of New York does not have the third level, but he hallucinates. Hallucinates means he sees that there is the third level of Grand Central Station, and also he reaches that. This is the main point of our story. This is the main problem of our story. If there is no third level, if there is no third level at the Grand Central Station, how does our protagonist reaches there? It means he hallucinates it. It means he sees it even if it does not exist. So that hallucination is the major point of our story. Now, our character Charlie, who is the protagonist of our story, he has a friend, and his friend's name is Sam. Sam is a psychiatrist. The entire of our story, the third level, will revolve around the story of Charlie. How does he reach the third level of the Grand Central Station? Then what happens next? what happens to the psychiatrist friend Sam. And after reaching to the third level of Grand Central Station, where does our protagonist Charlie go? Where does he reach? And what happens to him there? This is what we're going to learn in the story. So let us proceed with the detailed explanation of the story. The story begins with the conversation of Charlie and his psychiatrist friend. Charlie says to his psychiatrist friend that the president of the New York Railroad or the subway network will surely tell you that the Grand Central Rail network, the Grand Central Railway Station has only 2 floors, but I myself have seen the third floor of the station. Later on, he proceeds further with all the description that he has seen at the station. But his psychiatrist friend Sam says that you saw all these things as a hallucination. Everything that you saw was a hallucination, and this hallucination was a result of all of your problems. You are a war victim, you have many material or worldly problems, and you want to escape from all those problems, and that is why you just saw an imaginary dream. You just saw your dream coming true. For an instance, Charlie accepts what his friend says, but he is not totally and completely convinced with what he did say. Later in the second paragraph, he starts believing that his friend Sam is quite right. And Charlie thinks that yes, I am trying to escape the reality of the modern world problems, or just because I'm war victim, so I'm trying to escape what problems or the mental pressure that I have, or I'm trying to escape with the problems of my life. And on the other hand, he thinks that my stamp collecting yes, Charlie was a stamp collector. He has a hobby of collecting stamps. He had a wonderful collection of stamps, and he thinks that the hobby of collecting stamp is a hobby which makes him come out of all the mental problems that he has, or he sought solace in the stamp collection hobby, or he was finding escape from his everyday life while he collected stamp. So, on one hand, he was thinking that yes, my stamp collecting hobby is providing me an escape from my everyday mental torture. But again, he think that my grandfather also used to collect stamp. But at that time, there was no war. There was complete humanity. There was complete peace. Then why did he, if collecting this stamp is a means of escape, or is a means of dragging me out of the mental torture, then why did my grandfather collected stamps? Why was he collecting stamps? Because there was no war at his time. That's what Charlie thinks after the conversation of his with his friend Sam. Then proceeding further with the story, our author is Charlie, the 31-year-old person. Charlie is our author. Proceeding further with the story, Charlie explains that the day he hallucinated the third level of the Grand Central Station was a normal day like every day. And he worked till late in his office, and he just wanted to get home after the late working hours. So instead of taking a bus, he decided to take a train from the Grand Central Station. He just wanted to be with his wife at that hour. That's all he wanted to do. That's all he wanted to be. He was very normal, quite normally dressed up. And when he reached the Grand Central Station, he could see all the normal people. There was nothing unique, there was nothing extravagant, there was nothing which makes him to be surprised or flabbergasted. Everything was normal, and it was a normal day like every day, but the only difference was he got late little bit in his office, and he decided to take a train from Grand Central Station to reach his home so that he could be with his wife. And he was completely normally dressed up. He entered the Grand Central Railway Station, and he started moving on along with the huge crowd. And the crowd was all normal. There was nothing unique, there was nothing extravagant with that crowd. Charlie still say that he was really not knowing why did it happen to him. He entered the Grand Central Station from the gate which is at Vanderbilt Avenue. Then, for the first, he reached at first level. From people were taking trains like people take trains in the 20th century, means the present era, when the story was written. After this, he reached to the second level of the station. The second level, the platform from where trains from the suburban areas leave. Now, what are suburban areas? Suburban areas means the areas which are in the outskirts of the town. Which are in the outskirts of the town, they are called the suburban areas. So he reached the second level from where the trains leave for the suburban areas, and then he saw an arc kind of doorway, a doorway in the structure of an arc. He entered the doorway, and this was the point where he got lost. This was the point where he got lost, and this was the beginning of the hallucination of the third level. From here, everything gets changed. Till the second level of Grand Central Station, everything was right, everything was normal. But the moment he entered the arc kind of doorway, from here, everything got changed. This doorway led him to the third level of Grand Central Station, which actually did not exist. हिंदी में कहें तो ये मायावी दरवाज़ा था जो उसे एक ऐसी जगह ले गया जो वास्तव में अस्तित्व में है ही नहीं. So this arc kind of doorway was a gateway for him to reach to the third level of Grand Central Station, which did not even exist.